We're joined today by Ulster County Executive Jen Metzger, who has been a real environmental champion, not only in her capacity as county executive, but also when she was a state senator and a colleague of Senator Harkham's. And we are joined by the co-authors of this report, Jenny Gitlitz and Connor Chung. There are two significant economic benefits that will be realized when the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act becomes law. First, new fees are placed on packaging, and that new money will flow to local governments and also to customers of private waste haulers. This report doesn't deal with that new revenue source because we don't know how companies are going to choose to comply. They have many options. It's spread out over a long period of time. So some companies will just decide to use less plastic. Others will reduce their excess packaging, and some will shift to other materials and maybe even reusable or refillable packaging. Because we don't know all the moves that the companies will make to comply, we did not estimate that new revenue source going to local governments, but it is significant. Second, New Yorkers pay an enormous amount of money to collect, transport, recycle, landfill, or incinerate solid waste. And that's the focus of this important report. The avoided costs of having less packaging waste to deal with, and then the associated savings of less waste. 37 years after the New York State Legislature adopted the Solid Waste Management Act requiring mandatory recycling throughout the state, we are still at an anemic 19% recycling rate statewide. We need a waste reduction and recycling reboot in New York, and that's what this bill does. This bill is sponsored by Assemblymember Deborah Glick in the Assembly, Senator Pete Harckham in the Senate. And it has a few very crucial provisions. First, it requires a reduction of all single-use packaging materials by 30% over 12 years. And I failed to introduce myself. I'm the president of Beyond Plastics and former EPA regional administrator. And I remembered the second piece of my background because I worked on a lot of policies at the federal and state level that had long-term aspirational goals. This bill requires the reduction incrementally. So 10% reduction in packaging in year 3, 15% in year 5, 20% in year 8, 25% in year 10, and then 30% in year 12. This way, if there are problems with implementation, we learn about it early, not after the 12 years. This bill does not ban single-use packaging. It requires that it be reduced over 12 years. This is quite reasonable, 30% reduction in 12 years. Second, this bill requires a 75% recycling rate for the remaining packaging by 2052. That is a 27-year phase-in period. This is quite reasonable. The bill would also ban the worst toxic chemicals used in packaging. This includes PFAS, lead, mercury, vinyl chloride, formaldehyde, flame retardants. And I want to point out that there are 16,000 chemicals used to make plastic. This bill only bans 17 of the most toxic of the 16,000. This is quite reasonable. The bill prohibits a very harmful process known as chemical recycling to be considered real recycling. It does not ban chemical recycling. It just means you can't utilize it to comply with the recycling provisions of the law. This is quite reasonable. And finally, there is a modest fee on packaging paid by companies with the new money going to local governments and customers of waste haulers. This is not a government-run program. This is a program run by the packaging companies themselves and with important oversight by the state DEC and a new Office of Inspector General to make sure we have full compliance. This too is quite reasonable. New York is at a critical moment. Just this year, New York is expected to generate nearly 7.5 billion pounds of packaging waste. Much of that packaging is plastic. And let's put this in perspective. That's the same weight as 10 Empire State Buildings in a single year. Most of this packaging waste winds up at incinerators, landfills, polluting our communities. Much plastic enters the Hudson River, the East River, eventually gets into the Atlantic Ocean. That is not sustainable for the environment or for our wallets. So this report addresses the cost savings for local governments and private waste haulers for not having to pick up, process, and dispose of recycling and much single-use packaging. To estimate how much New Yorkers would save under Senator Harckham and Assemblymember Glick's bill, our analysis compared current collection and disposal costs to a future where this bill is fully implemented. According to the analysis by Beyond Plastics, New Yorkers will save $1.3 billion over the next 10 years when this law is adopted. $1.3 billion in savings. That's billion with a B. That's over 560 million in savings for taxpayers and nearly 700 million in savings for customers of private waste haulers. 2/3 of the annual savings will accrue to New York City, which stands to save $818 million over the 10 years. So if you look at the report, there's a breakdown. It's done by DEC region. Not everyone knows what the DEC regions are, so there are the counties in there. Long Island, for instance, will save 142 million. As I mentioned, New York City, 818 million. Westchester and Dutchess, Orange, Putnam, Rockland, Sullivan, Ulster, and Westchester counties, 103 million. Capital District, Albany area, 33 million in savings. Western New York, 50 million. Each of the regions are laid out. And again, this 1.3 billion in savings is just part of the picture. It doesn't include money flowing to local governments. We know that local governments need money to improve their recycling programs, but this bill goes an important step further. It also provides new revenue to fund waste reduction or prevention. The best solid waste management strategy is when you don't create waste. You don't have to pick it up, collect it, send it to a polluting incinerator or landfill. So some examples of what could be funded when this bill becomes law is installing dishwashing equipment in schools and hospitals and other public institutions. Why have our children eat food out of single-use plastic packaging when they could be served food on real dishes that are then just washed over and over again? Second, we've all been in airports where there's a nice water refill station so you can refill your reusable water bottle. Why not put those water refill stations in train stations and bus stations and other public locations? We could fund local reuse centers like the one currently operating in the Finger Lakes Reuse Incorporated, where people bring gently used materials and products that they no longer need, and others can purchase them at a low cost. The Finger Lakes Reuse Center does 600 transactions at their cash register every day. Packaging waste is projected to make up more than a fifth of New York's municipal solid waste in 2025. 30% of that is plastic, and we know the serious health and environmental problems with plastic. New York is home to 25 landfills that are rapidly running out of space and 10 aging incinerators. All but one of the state's garbage incinerators are located in environmental justice communities. And we know that incinerators emit large amounts of toxic chemicals that can cause cancer and respiratory disease. And they are a huge emitter of greenhouse gases. Of the 1.5 million tons of packaging material covered by this bill, that New York City residents and businesses generate every day, our analysis estimates that 1.2 million tons are actually incinerated or landfilled, as opposed to reused or recycled. Managing all of this waste is expensive and also has an environmental cost. The Finger Lakes region of the state will see enormous benefits. Three of the state's largest landfills are located in the Finger Lakes. And you think of the Finger Lakes, that's a region that really depends on tourism and wineries, not trash. The largest landfill in the state is called Seneca Meadows. It's a private landfill that accepts 6,000 tons of garbage every day. 30% of the garbage that goes to this landfill is trucked up in diesel trucks up the thruway from New York City to the Finger Lakes. And a judge just upheld a local law directing that the landfill be closed. New York City also sends waste to be burned at the Covanta garbage incinerator in Newark, New Jersey, in an environmental justice community. So when we consider adoption of this bill, there are broader implications: less respiratory illness, fewer cancer risks in communities that are homes to incinerators and landfills, lower greenhouse gas emissions. This is really good for the people of New York. The legislation has traction. There are 73 co-sponsors in the Assembly, 29 in the Senate. So it has nearly majority support in both houses. Local governments across the state support this bill. And I want to conclude by saying we are living in a throwaway society, but there is no away. We are living in a throwaway society, and there is no away. As New York's landfills fill up, as its incinerators age, packaging waste continues to mount. State legislators have a choice. Do they let this crisis worsen, or do they take action this legislative session when this common sense solution can be voted upon and benefit every single New Yorker? It's now my great pleasure to introduce State Senator Pete Harckham.
Thank you so much, Judith. Thank you for your remarks. Thank you and your great team at Beyond Plastics for being just amazing allies and advocates. I want to thank my good friend, Jen Metzger. Great to see you, Jen. Thanks for being here, and thanks for all you do. And I want to thank the authors of this report. This is a groundbreaking report. Judith mentioned some of the overall benefits of the Packaging Reduction Recycling Infrastructure Act, a reduction in packaging, a financial boost to municipalities, the encouraging of recycled content in packaging, and the removal of toxins. What we're quantifying today are massive tax savings to our municipalities and our taxpayers. As Judith quantified, we are drowning in garbage. I represent Peekskill, where one of these waste incinerators is. Maybe, 10, 15 years ago, waste incinerators were thought of as an elegant solution, unless, of course, you live in a community where one is located. And the trucks and the diesel soot coming and going, the emissions from the plant, it's not an elegant solution. And as Judith mentioned, we're running out of landfill space. So the Packaging Reduction Recycling Infrastructure Act, and I should mention, we did pass in the Senate last year. Very proud of that. But we have a lot of work to do. We've got to get it passed again. And this time we need to get it passed in the Assembly. But what this report quantifies are real dollar savings to taxpayers. Taxpayers have been footing the bill for too long. What extended producer responsibility laws do, and they're nothing new to New York. We have extended producer responsibility for paint, for electronics, for carpet, and now this is an extended producer responsibility bill for packaging. Rather than putting the cost for single-use plastic and disposable packaging on the cost of taxpayers and consumers, it now puts the cost back on municipalities. And the reduction of that waste, $1.3 billion, as Judith mentioned, with a B, $1.3 billion. That's an incredible saving as local governments are cash strapped, as taxpayers are more burdened than ever. That's why this bill is being heavily supported by New York City, by the New York State Association of Counties. What does $1.3 billion do? Think of teachers, think of social workers, think of firefighters, think of police officers. Dare we say tax relief? This is badly needed um, financial resource savings to our municipalities and our taxpayers who've had to foot the burden for this disposable packaging culture that we've lived with for 70 years. It's time that we pass this bill in both houses. The governor signed the bill, and the report today is a real shot in the arm. This is a quantifiable, credible report about over $1 billion in savings, just over 100 million in the Hudson Valley alone, which Jen and I represent. Again, incredible savings to taxpayers and ratepayers who are paying for the disposal of waste. So with that, I think I'll wrap up my remarks, but I just want to thank everybody again for your efforts. This is an incredibly important report, really provides wind to our sails as we continue to build momentum for the passage of this bill. Incredibly important environmental bill, but also an incredibly important public health bill. And now, as we are learning from today's report, an incredibly important fiscal bill for the savings that will be coming to our municipalities. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Senator Harckham. This is a green bill that will save green. And I want to point out that Senator Harckham is the chair of the Environmental Conservation Committee in the Senate, and he's already passed this bill out of his committee. Next step is Senate Finance and then Senate floor. And the bill already passed under Assemblymember Deborah Glick's leadership out of the Assembly Environmental Conservation Committee last month. So I am so delighted to introduce County Executive Jen Metzger.
Thanks so much, Judith, and Senator Harckham. Thank you, as always, for your environmental leadership and for really championing this bill. And this is the year, and the whole Beyond Plastics team, the authors of this report, this is going to just generate the momentum we need right now for this legislation. So in addition to being Ulster County executive, I also chair the New York State Association of Counties Climate Action, Energy, and Environment Committee. And for 3 years in a row now, the New York State Association of Counties, all 62 counties, has unanimously passed a resolution urging state lawmakers to pass this legislation. Three's a charm, as they say, and it really needs to be passed and signed into law this year. We are facing a solid waste crisis. Here in Ulster County, our Resource Recovery Agency has been in high gear trying to figure out an alternative to our current system of disposal. We're spending $11 million annually to truck 140,000 tons of waste a year to Seneca Meadows. As Judith mentioned, that's about a 480-mile round trip from Ulster County. And in the process, we're burning an extraordinary amount of fossil fuels, producing over 6,200 tons of greenhouse gas emissions a year. Just the financial costs and climate costs are unacceptable. And that landfill, as Judith pointed out, is on the verge of closing, right? So we're grappling with really hard questions here about about siting a landfill. And we also recognize that we need to, as communities, but as New York State, double down on reducing and eliminating sources of waste altogether. About 17% of Ulster County's waste is packaging, which could be substantially reduced by this law. Here in the Hudson Valley, as was mentioned, we could see $103 million in avoided costs of just from collecting packaging waste and hauling it to the landfill and various incinerators and recycling facilities. That would be huge for the region. The savings that from fees are also really important. I know this particular report didn't quantify the impacts of the fees the law would establish, but I just want to say that this revenue is critically important to counties and local governments to help offset the costs for collecting, processing, transporting, recycling, disposing of these materials. The only real opponents to this law are the companies generating this waste. They have been free riding, not having to pay any of the costs of excessive, toxic, unrecyclable packaging. Those costs, the cost of disposal, the cost to the environment, the cost to us, to our health, they're all borne by us, not them. So, this is really a critical moment. We have to get this legislation over the finish line. I want to again thank Beyond Plastics for their advocacy. I really want to thank the sponsors, Assemblywoman Glick, Senator Harckham for really championing this legislation. Let's get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, County Executive Metzger. And Marissa, I think we'll turn it over to you for questions from reporters.
Yes, thank you, Judith. Thank you all. So if you are a reporter with a question, please either put your name and outlet in the chat or raise your Zoom hand and we will call on you. And in the meantime, I am putting my email in the chat. Please reach out if you have any questions today. We'll give it another minute or so. All right, Raya Rivard with Politico has a question.
Yeah, thank you. Just one thing, I think the chat's disabled for some of us, so I couldn't put my name in. The question is, Judith, in doing this report, did you calculate the offsetting cost, the sort of drag on, I guess, consumers who buy plastics of the fees that presumably will be passed along, and sort of how that affects the sort of savings? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rye. Good question. We did not. We really are focused on avoided costs of not generating so much waste that needs to be transported, processed, disposed of. We did not address the consumer issues per se, but I do want to share two really important data points for you and others. One is Consumer Reports put out a memo in support of this bill. And their memo from March of this year says there is no evidence that consumer prices will rise as a result of this policy and this bill. And then second, and we can share this with you, a Columbia University professor, Professor Bose, B-O-S-E, did a white paper looking at the consumer impact of adopting this bill. And Professor Bose estimated that the average household at most will see an increase in costs of $1 per week. So that's per household, not per person, $1 per week, if there is an increase at all. So we feel pretty confident in this Columbia University professor's analysis. And I always look at Consumer Reports before I buy anything big. I think Consumer Reports is a good objective source. So we would direct you to those two data points.
Judith, if I can add one point here. We know that companies may have to retool machinery. We heard that in our consultations with them, and that's why we put availability of Empire tax credits and other tax credits for manufacturing changeover, as long as they're New York-based companies, of which there are many. So we're taking this into account to try to mitigate those costs for the brands. And as Judith mentioned, Consumer Reports predicts no cost increase to consumers. Columbia University, $1 per week per household.
And to put a finer point on this, I didn't expect the tariff issue to emerge in such a significant way this legislative session. And Associated Press moved a story on April 1st talking about how less packaging is one way that some companies are anticipating dealing with the tariffs. I won't recite the really compelling parts of this report because the hour is getting late, but I will share this AP story with you from April 1st, where they interview a toy company and how they're thinking about significantly reducing packaging in order to save on tariffs.
Hi, Judy. I don't know if this is Rob Gavin with the Buffalo News. I don't know if everybody can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you beautifully.
Thanks so much. The report says that obviously there'd be 1.3 billion saved over the next 10 to 12 years, and that would include 50 million in Western New York. I guess my question would be, if you're just talking to the average consumer out there, what can you put that into a layman's terms? Like in which way is that money going to be saved, and how will that be accomplished? And I guess the other side of it would be, from a parochial perspective, 5 of the 25 municipal landfills are in Western New York, I should say far Western New York. It's more obviously in the Finger Lakes. I guess I'm assuming I guess what effect does this bill have on them? Obviously, they're running out of time, but those would be my 2 questions. So.
Two excellent questions. So when this bill becomes law, we will see less packaging waste going to landfills, plain and simple. So if you unfortunately live next to a landfill, you want to see it closed as soon as possible. And this means less waste. That also means some of the private landfill owners are not supportive of this because they want to keep filling up their landfill. They get paid a tipping fee. The situation at Seneca Meadows in the Finger Lakes is extraordinary. Every time I am near there, I am astonished how the mountain of trash gets bigger and bigger. We're trying to reduce waste. They're trying to bring in more because it's more money for them. You pay a per ton tipping fee. So if you live near a landfill, you will love this bill. And if you are a taxpayer, what this means is, not in all communities, but in many, waste disposal is included in your local taxes. So if there's less to pick up, there will be savings. And I will point out that there will be more cost associated with recycling because we'll see more recyclables. But we have found that people don't necessarily complain about more recycling. People want more recycling. What they don't want is to pay for, as County Executive Metzger mentioned, they don't want to pay for their waste being trucked over 400 miles back to Ulster County to Seneca Meadows and then back to be buried in a landfill that we are really concerned is contaminating the local community. Jen, did you want to add anything?
Well, I would just point out, some of the solutions that you mentioned at the end of your talk at the beginning that can be supported by this bill. We're actively pursuing in Ulster County. We're creating a reuse innovation center, a whole kind of hub and spoke model to really, create that reuse economy that ultimately, especially in the world of tariffs and high prices, is we're going to have more and more residents looking, to purchase things that, they're gently used. They're just as good as new products, but at much less cost. And there are a lot of savings associated with a reuse economy and moving in that direction. We have to move in that direction. We don't have a choice, but there's also going to be really direct financial savings to ordinary residents.
The other thing I would
Oh,
add is if you want to say what is the direct impact to local municipalities, these savings can be used for more police officers, more firefighters, more teachers, more social workers that we desperately need, or it can be used for tax relief. $1.3 billion is a significant amount of money, even when you spread that out statewide. $103 million in the Hudson Valley alone is a significant amount of savings for municipalities that they can choose to reinvest in any number of ways, or they can pass some of that along as tax breaks to beleaguered taxpayers.
Where does the garbage go when these landfills are filled? And I say that as someone from Staten Island who was very familiar with the Fresh Kills landfill, and I believe that that's probably one of the reasons why those trucks are sending garbage to these communities upstate, is because the Fresh Kills landfill is no longer in use. So what happens when those landfills upstate in Western New York close, like that one closed?
So I'm happy to say a few words from a county perspective, because this is a huge issue. I mean, statewide, all of the landfills are expected to reach capacity minimally in 16 years, right? And it takes about a decade to go through the whole regulatory process to site a new landfill. So this is like, we are facing a very, very serious crisis. And, no community wants a landfill. That's just like, that is like the definitional NIMBY issue is trying to site a landfill. The best of all worlds is to shrink the needed footprint as much as possible for a landfill by reuse, recycling, and importantly, reduction, getting rid of excess waste there's just simply no reason for, but there's never been an incentive before to reduce it. Again, I feel like we don't have a choice. We face a crisis here. Our communities face a crisis here.
And that's why this bill is crucial, because waste generation is just increasing. Right now, 39% of waste in New York is landfilled. 15% is burned at incinerators. 19%, as I mentioned, is recycled. 27% is exported out of state. When you export waste long distances, the transportation alone is enormously expensive for local governments. So running out of landfill space and having a fleet of polluting incinerators should compel state lawmakers and the governor to adopt this bill this year.
All right, and we've got one last question. Mia Quick from the Legislative Gazette.
Hi there. I just wanted to ask if there's an expected impact on smaller businesses.
Senator, you want to handle that? Small business?
Yes, that's a great question. And in our due diligence over the last 2 years, we heard both from small businesses and from New York agriculture, which 99% qualifies as a small business. 99% of New York farms earn less than $5 million a year in revenue. So we upped. The original bill had $1 million threshold for revenue. After listening to stakeholders, we raised that threshold to $5 million in revenue, and from 1 ton to 2 tons of packaging a year. So what we have done is we have effectively exempted over 99% of New York State agriculture. Then we went one step further. We actually exempted milk co-ops with less than 50 employees. So it's 99.X% of New York agriculture has been protected by this bill, as are small businesses under $5 million in revenue.
Continuing the theme that this is a very reasonable bill.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you all. You have my email. Please reach out if you have any follow-up questions this afternoon. Thanks again for joining and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.